when you're a teacher of anything, you can't really ask the students to come to your level of understanding. You'll have to go to theirs. We have culminated one age, and every astrological age kind of has a package of karma. Humanity's kind of called to deal with the problems they've created. And that's not always an easy thing.
Everything we've created has always been here. The phones that we have, the raw materials have all been here. We just learned how to create this technology.
Trying to learn how to be responsible with all the power, the creative power that is there just for the tapping of it. But one of the things that's happened in the evolution of consciousness is that humans have done this thing called fear, and it's totally projecting whatever's going on now into the future and experiencing before it even happens.
I'd like to welcome to the show Kathlyn Kingdon. How you doing, Kathleen?
I'm doing very well, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I am beyond excited to talk to you because I was just recently introduced to this Ascended Master who I had never heard of. There's thousands of them, so obviously I haven't heard of all of them. But this Ascended Master is one that is fairly famous, but yet not. So he's very famous, I think, more in the metaphysical world, but he's not. He doesn't have the spotlight of Saint Germain or of Baba G or these kind of people who have better PR people, essentially. So we're here to remedy that. we're here to remedy that. The story goes, and I was telling you this before we got on air, is that I was interviewing in a channel a psychic the other day. And at the end, after we started recording, she turns to me, she goes, there's two beings who are kind of whispering in your ears. And I said, sure, my life is strange. Why wouldn't there be two beings whispering in my ear? And one of them was Yogananda, and the other one was Master DK, or Master, and I will mispronounce his name a few times, Djwhal Khul is what, and you can,
Djwhal.
Djwhal.
Just like a
Djwhal.
hard Djwhal Khul.
Okay. Djwhal Khul. So the D is silent, essentially. Yeah. Djwhal Khul.
Yeah.
Okay. So Master Djwhal Khul. And I said, who's that? And he's like, oh my God, you haven't heard of him. He's a very, when he works with people, it's very, very special. And I was like, okay, great. And then 3 days later, you show up. Like just popped out of the sky. And if she wouldn't have mentioned it, it wouldn't have caught my eye as fast, but it did. So he works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?
Yes, he's often behind the scenes in one way or another. And then suddenly we're aware of him, in remarkable ways, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are a channel, and you've been channeling for 40, how many years?
I'll be 42 in the spring, come next spring.
40. So just getting started. Got it. Just getting started.
Well, there's some truth in that.
But Master D, so you've been channeling Djwhal Khul this entire time, correct?
Yeah. Yes. Well, periodically I've channeled other beings too. If someone shows up, often, let's say someone is having a personal session with Master. I call him Master, which is just short for Ascended Master because the title's too long. But somebody else will come in and say, can they talk to the person? And I'll do that. But predominantly, my commitment is to him. Yes.
So what was your life like before this insanity of channeling an Ascended Master? Because when you came in, it wasn't the cool thing to be,
no, Oh, tell me. Well, I was in law firm administration for one of the big firms in Denver. And suddenly this was very interesting because doors started closing. It was the epitome of an all-male organization, a law firm. And anyway, I was in administration, and the first woman that had really done that in the area was a long time ago. Anyway, and so I had this interaction with him, and basically he kind of was reeling me in like a fish out of water. And but it was difficult because I certainly lost all the friends and acquaintances that I had at the time. None of them could make the leap. And I wasn't sure I could make it either at the time. But apparently it worked out okay. So
Mhm.
here we are.
So when you first, how did it start? Like, I mean, he was reeling you in and all of this kind of good stuff, but did you hear his voice? Did you think you were going crazy? I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there back in the
Oh yeah,
80s
yeah.
when you started. So very few, other than the Seth books, and there
That
was
was about it.
maybe
Yeah, that was
Thea.
about
I
it.
mean, I know Sheila Gillette. I think with Thea was just getting
Yeah,
started.
yeah,
Daryl with Bashar was just getting
yeah.
started around that time as well. So there
This is the
wasn't a
old guard.
lot.
No.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Well, I actually, you see, these things like these things seem like they're mistakes or just happenstance or whatever. But I was going through a relationship breakup, and someone recommended, "Oh, there's going to be a channel coming in town. Maybe you can get some insight." So I'm the type that always does my homework, you know. So I went in with 7 pages of questions about what was happening in this relationship, and I sit down and we start talking, and it's coming through another channel. And so I start in on my relationship. He asked some questions for me. I have no idea what those are at this point. But then he said, I see you have some notes. And I said, well, yes, I wanted to know about this relationship. And so I started asking questions. And he said, well, I want to talk about your commitment. And I said, my commitment? He said, yes, yes, yes. He says, how do you like it? It was the Tibetan Foundation. He said, how do you like the foundation? I, said, well, I don't know anything about it. It was from an organization in Phoenix, and the channel came to Denver periodically and worked. And so I'm sitting in front of her, and I was feeling very strange because I said, well, I think the organization is okay. And he says, well, how would you like to work for us? And I said, work for you? Yeah, yeah, he says. I said, well, I don't know. He says, well, what would you like to do? And I swear I had never thought of this, but what came out of my mouth was, well, how about a little healing? And I'm like, I'm not a healer. And then I hear coming out of his mouth, well, how about a little channeling? And I said, oh, I said, no, I said, I don't even know if I believe in this. But it kind of went from there. He went home with me from that session, and I heard him all the time. Suddenly, having not heard him previous to that
Mm.
encounter, then I heard him all the time. And so then it was decided that I needed to go to Phoenix to get training. Wow, that sounded like a good idea because I had no idea what I was launching into. So it was set up so that I would be there at the time the Tibetan Foundation had its annual board meeting. And anyway, this was run by a group of elder ladies, wonderful people, but I was 35. You know, I didn't think I had a lot in common with them, except that I'm used to running a law firm, and what I could see was how they didn't know how to run a meeting and how their records shouldn't be what they were. I mean, this is so I thought, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to clean up the organization, but it didn't exactly work that way. At the end of the second day of the board meeting, Janet said to everyone there, "Well, we're going to train Kathlyn, so everybody can just come over to my house and we'll leave the office and go there." And I thought, I'm going to be training in front of a whole lot of people whom I don't even know. I thought this was really a violation of my privacy. But anyway, this is like this. So we get over to the house. Everybody's sitting there. Janet gives a little introduction. She's channeling master. And then I'm asked to come up and sit at this thing. And there's an old dictaphone there, the kind, you usually you
Mm-hmm.
pick up the thing anyway. And so she has me sit down there. And then she turns to me and says, okay, channel. I was like totally shocked. I have no idea what happened, but at some point words started coming out of my mouth. And anyway, through Janet, Master said, oh, well, that's a 95% accuracy, whatever. So they sent me back to Denver with about 200 requests for personal sessions. I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea who these people were. Some were from Europe, some from Canada, most are from the United States. But I had absolutely nothing to go on. That was the training. It was just the faith to turn on the tape recorder, because that's what we used in those days. Turn on the tape recorder, I did close my eyes in and just said, help me out here. And he would launch in and he would do sometimes some remarkable sessions for people. And sometimes he was talking about situations in their life that were really not very savory. I mean, people have had a lot of trauma, one kind or another. And I always thought, oh, what if we get it wrong? Because there was no feedback. Absolutely no one there going, oh, yeah, yeah, that did happen. And But anyway, as it turned out, people apparently liked what he did. And then before I could even leave the law firm, I was probably doing 100 personal sessions a month, and just sitting there looking at the wall and doing master. So that's how I got started, and from there it's kind of grown and done other things. But it's hilarious looking back. It was terrifying at the time. So
So let me ask you, we're talking about Master. Can you talk a little bit about who he was when he lived? Because from the research I've done on him, he was a Tibetan master of some. He was a Tibetan master. Can you talk about a little bit about what his life is, and then we can kind of dive into some of his core
well,
teachings.
I since I've been around him, I think sometimes these great beings have dual lives going on at the same time, probably in different places in the world. But probably what he's most famous for, in the West at least, is he has the reputation of being one of the three magi. He was Casper, the one of the wise men, and he was the one that was notably hard of hearing. And if you, I didn't know that until I, for some reason, was looking into a mall in the night visitors, where they kind of have the characters there as the three wise men, and Casper's the one that's hard of hearing, and he's all the way through that. Now, where they got all this, I don't know, but I did ask him. I said, was that really true? And he said, well, yeah, it was. He said, I gave people a lot of laughs because I didn't always hear what they were saying and so on. But that's the one that probably rings through the most. Other than that, I do know he worked with Alice Bailey, who just did volumes and volumes and volumes of his works. And then when he started working through me, I said to him, well, I guess I better read the Bailey material. And he said, please don't. He said, I want to do something different through you. And I don't want what we do to be influenced by your subconscious of having read somebody else. So, to most people's surprise, I've never read the Bailey works, even though it's seminal. It's great stuff. So, but he said, when I was coming through Alice Bailey, my mission really was to prepare the minds of humanity, to stretch them, give them a much broader and vaster mental body. And so he did. If you ever read any of that stuff, it's very difficult to understand and so on. But then what he said to me was, I want to work with the emotional body in our work through you, because he said the emotional body is behind the mental body. That if you go back and look at how a whole populace on a planet does their group initiations, he said the Lemurian time was when we were doing the physical initiation. And so the emotional one should have been next. But somehow with the Atlantean time, I guess, is when there was a whole episode of, I don't know how many years, probably several thousand years of heightened mental activity. But the mental and the spiritual kind of blended together. So the science teachers were also the spiritual teachers and so on and so forth. But somehow humanity, he said, skipped their collective emotional initiation. So consequently, we have not really learned how to use our emotions all that well. We have, they're wonderful because they give us this wide experiential zone. But he said, we haven't really learned to distinguish between what is true and what's emotions. If we get anger, we believe in our anger, or the person or the situation is to blame, and all of that. And he feels like humanity is a little bit behind where they should be now with their emotional body. He said, the mental body, look what we're doing with technology. It's soared way out there in front. But so anyway, it's not that he talks about the emotional reality so much. It's this, that so much of the work we do really is working with individuals and their own integrating lifetimes, or trying to integrate the activities and the events of a given life and personal life. So we have worked with that more than he ever did through Alice. And I think he's in some ways probably more relatable to humans today than when he was coming through her. But anyway, that's a little bit about what he told me and how we've worked. Done, oh my goodness, lots of workshops that involve clarifying of emotional states, or working with. We did several years. We did workshops for people that were severely sexually and physically abused, and those are hard workshops, frankly, because all this comes up in the middle of it. And usually we kept them to 20 to 24 people because that's about what one person can handle in an intense situation like that. But I would say that to see those people today is
Mm,
really a beautiful thing. Of course, they're all my age, they're not spring
mm,
chickens anymore. But basically, most people just feel so touched by his intention, the way he shows intention and attention to people, and the way he can take almost anything, a question that would seem kind of shallow and not very significant. He can take it and turn it into this beautiful teaching that speaks to many different people at many different levels. So that's uh,
so
that's the short version.
so besides being the Magi and being one of the three wise men, um, I'm assuming these are the three wise men who were with
Yeah, yeah,
Yeshua. Okay,
yeah,
I just got to
yeah.
clarify. Just got to
That's
clarify.
right. Yes.
So, what do you know when he started? I mean, because if you're a wise man during the time of Jesus, that means that he had been already essentially a master, a walking master
Right.
during the times of Yeshua coming in. So, how far back does he go? And then where does the Tibetan aspect come in?
Boy, these are all good questions, and I've never asked him these actually. But I mean, I think there comes a point when we're much more aligned with our eternality than our given lifetimes. There's kind of like punctuation points in this stream of beingness, and I think these masters are much more aligned with that stream of beingness than they are with their individual lifetimes. Although in terms, I didn't know much about him other than that he worked through Alice Bailey. But
Mm-hmm.
then when we hear these other things, I sometimes, well, I've seen how he is when people bring up other masters like the Master Jesus. People want to talk or sit with him, and I see how respectful Master is. And to one person, I think he once said, "Well, how do you know we're not the same being?" I mean, individuation is what happens when you get a physical body, but it's not necessarily the reality for all of us. Now, he didn't say he was the same being, and my sense isn't that he wasn't trying to say that. But I think one of the things that I experience with him is that he's always trying to stretch our picture. However we see it, well, it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger. And certainly that has been my experience of him. I think it's not like he sits and teaches me. That has never been our MO. But when we're working and I get to look through his eyes, that
Mm-hmm.
has been a huge stretcher of the reality that I embody or that I work within. So it is, there was just this timeless sense that seems to be with him, even though he has no problem entering into our time dimensions. And I think probably it feels like a little bit of a limitation to him, but he's really willing to take that on to help us if it's workable.
The thing with the Ascended Masters is they all are here to kind of help humanity move forward a little bit
Mm.
and open and guide us and just kind of like a big brother or a parent kind of trying to push us or nudge us in the right direction, and not just individuals, which they do, but more grandiose macro, and they do
Mm.
micro but they also do macro. Is that what you feel as well?
Oh, I do feel that way. I think our perspective of things is so driven by this little lifetime that we have. This, for most of us, it's not even 100 years, and that is so much nothing in terms of the time that the Earth has been here, or if we take that the time of the cosmos, or however it
Mm.
all came about. Um, but I think somehow he is able to encompass a much bigger picture than we are. Partly it's probably all the lives he's lived, but I think it's more than that. I think it's this: the masters have this capacity to see holistically, whereas we don't always have that. We sometimes get caught up in the small picture, which is what we're supposed to be working on, so that's fine. But yes, I think it is to learn how to take a breath of fresh air that has to do much more with beingness than being a person.
So how do you channel Master DK? How do you channel him?
Relax for a moment and kind of change places with him.
Simple as that.
Well, I guess so. I mean, it's when I first started working with him, we were in front of these audiences, and within just a few months, we'd gone from 12 people to um, 75, and then 150. I mean, it was kind of amazing. And so, what he would tell me was, okay, when we get ready to work, he said, you look out there, and you find a chair. Or if we had, for a while, we were having weekly meetings in a rather large church building uh, here in Denver, or in Denver. And he said, you look out there and you'll find a place that's empty. Then you project yourself out there and you sit there. And when you can see yourself looking back at me, we're ready to start. So I'm out there myself looking back at myself, essentially, because I didn't see him. And I was never really sure we were ready, but he would start talking. And so I don't really have to do that anymore. But it was a way in which I was able to kind of get my ego out of the way. It gave me a focus to, is it? I had Janet McClure, who basically was the channel through whom I met Master when I was there for my training. She said to me, well, what focus do they give you? I said, what do you mean? Well, what do you have to focus on when you're channeling? I said, I don't know what you mean. And she said, well, when they trained me, I had to sit in a chair and keep my focus on a clock face for 8 hours. And when I could do that, I was ready to channel. And so I thought, oh, that's pretty interesting. I said, well, no, he's never asked me to do that. So I thought, well, maybe I should do that. I said, okay. So I said to him, Master, I'm gonna do this now. And when you give our next lecture, I'm gonna. So I thought, what could I focus on? So I thought, well, I'm a musician. So I thought, oh, I'll focus on music. And anyway, I was hearing a part of Judas Maccabeus, which is oratorio. It was a piece called Enter the Conqueror. I've also been a choral conductor. So anyway, and it's a large chorus that sings this. But I could never get more than 4 bars into it. And it would start over again. And we're trying to do this lecture. I have an audience out here, and I'm really focusing on this music, And finally, very sweetly, in the middle of it, he just kept talking. But inwardly, I hear, Kathlyn, could we please turn off the music? And so I thought, okay, we'll let that go. But basically, I could see that the way she did it was different than the way I did it. And I just tried to focus on Master, see him and be with him and so on. So, but anymore, I've been doing this for so long. It's just kind of an eye blink away, that positioning of consciousness. And the idea is to get my consciousness out of the way and let his fill the void.
And do you feel energized when you do it, or do you feel wiped when you do it?
Well, in a way, it's kind of like any other job. You go to work one day and you're exhausted. You go to away and it's essentially the same thing, but the next time you're energized by it. And I've always found that as well with this job too. In that way, it's very much like any other job. But the ways that it's different is that we always have to be aware of where that ego is. Because, when I first started working with him, I told him I'd channel if I could be a unconscious channel. And he just said, no, I don't want that. But that was me protecting myself a little bit. I just said I didn't want to know what was going on. So,
well, can we bring in Master?
Certainly. Yeah, just a moment. Well, good afternoon, Alex. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I wouldn't have missed it I think I've been on your show before. I just am not recognizable at times.
So my first question to you, Master, is what is the connection that you have with the Tibetan connection as far as that lifetime is concerned? Because you are known as the Tibetan master or something like that. So how can you explain that part of your incarnation back then?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a number of lives in Tibet. For me, that was the best place for me to get my enlightenment. The way spirituality worked in Tibet was good, but this isn't really known that much. But I was the ninth Panchen Lama also. And so I have a lot of history in Tibet and India, actually, because it was the Indian masters that came to Tibet that taught the Tibetans. And then, of course, Tibetans had at one time, the spirituality there at one time had been the Bon religion, which is a very animistic religion. And basically, it was by the grace and wonder of the great Indian masters who came and taught us. And I also was fortunate to get to go to Nalanda University in India in one of my lifetimes. So that Eastern connection was, I would say, very important for me in so many ways. And it was very helpful. So I have a long history with Tibet, also India, and a somewhat lesser involvement with the West, although the West is a very exciting place to be, you see. And I think,
And what was your
I was going to say the West is where this New Age movement is really happening. It had to come to a different place, really. And it's very hard when you have a tradition, a spiritual tradition that has been there for hundreds of years. It's very hard to just upend it and suddenly go in a different direction. It's not that it's a different direction so much, but there are different things about. The New Age is really about bringing together all these masters and seeing how they are solidified in a kind of oneness that is really quite remarkable if you're at the human level. It is, everything is individuated there, isn't it? Everybody, you don't ever mistake yourself for somebody else because you have this sense, this great sense of I'm over here, this person is over there. But when you no longer need a body, everything changes. And one is wherever one thinks about, you see. So it's really an amazing exchange, I think, that which goes between spiritual and physical planes. It's really a beautiful connection and one that allows for so much sweetness to arise and settle in the heart.
what is the purpose of the Ascended Masters and what are they trying to do for humanity?
It's tough being human. And so while there have always been people, and you can go back into the Aryan age, you can into the age of Cancer, you can go back several astrological ages, and what you'll see is that there have always been those who somehow learned how to ascend. And by that, a lot of people think sending means you're done with the earth plane, and maybe that's not quite true. Maybe you've just figured out how to live, or you've figured out how to be. And I posed recently to a group of, we had a high donors meeting not too long ago, and I posed to them, I said, well, your quest right now is to figure out how to be in the world as it is today. It's much different. And spirituality is shifting. The hierarchies of prior traditions have, in some ways, less sway with most people. And so the idea is, of course, to raise the guru or the teacher within. And so these ascension has always been a part of the picture. It's not been one that happened in public very much. Still doesn't really. But all of this, now we're seeing what's happening with humanity, is even things like enlightenment is much more of a group process right now. But it isn't, I have to always tell my students, no, it's not like you have a group of your friends over for Sunday dinner and you decide the group of you is going to get enlightened or maybe ascend. It doesn't work that way. The group you don't get to pick. It's people all over the earth that are ready and open at a given moment to which something remarkable can happen. It's a huge shift in consciousness where you shift out of a smaller, shall we say, slower gear and into kind of high gear. And but that's what this time is about. Will humanity do it? That probably remains to be seen because humanity has some choices in the matter too. This is nothing being foisted upon anyone. It really is about understanding the consciousness of the divine, really experiencing it as it expresses in every living being, certainly on this planet, but it's in the mineral kingdom as well. It's in the plant kingdom. Now, plants don't become enlightened and ascend the way people do. Animals don't either. But animals have, let's say, a little more connection to the human realm and so greater possibilities. But when you think that everything in creation is the divine unfolding, it's continually recycling itself, you might say, redefining itself, and then experiencing itself. And that's really what humans are trying to learn right now. How can I relate to the divine as I see it in the snowflake, or as I see it in an ocean, or in a tsunami, or in a wildfire for that matter? But to really experience that this is all part of one vast divine consciousness. And for people to understand, I'm partaking in that. Because just as surely as that divine consciousness is in me, I am in it. But I maybe as a human don't pay that much attention to it. And so it's really a time of training. Where does one or where should one place one's attention? And how does one negotiate the world as if enlightened, as if, may I say, healed from traumatic experiences in prior times? So this is a time of a lot of, in a way, an amalgamation. And to some extent, Alex, this happens every time there is a shift in astrological ages. We're coming out of the influence of all of this energy coming from the constellation of Pisces, and now it's beginning to come from the constellation of Aquarius. And, to most people, that's just light coming from these stars, and that it is. And yet, just like everything else in creation, everything is uniquely its own. The divine manifests somewhat differently through the constellation of Aquarius than it did through the constellation of Pisces. So the picture is very big. And yet, what happens then for humans, and everybody's begun to talk about this. This means people who haven't essentially been studying this are sort of getting that this is a different time. I tell my students it's the time where we replace the I with the we, and that it is much more of a collective experience with everything. And so it's, I think, particularly through the Piscean age, there was so much aggrandizement of the ego. The I that knows this, the I that's stronger, the I that's richer, the I that has more power, But these were all power over kind of ways of seeing power. And so what we want to move into is, rather than having power over, we want to have power for, whether it be power for the family, power for the school system, power for even a nation or something. But it's where everyone can be part of that empowerment and not necessarily feel that they've been subjected to a power over dynamic for so long. So this is a huge shift, really. And so the masters are all here to help humanity do this. We do it in different ways. Indeed, we sort of take on a personality. You see, once we quit being persons, we don't need a personality anymore. But because we're working with persons, they relate to personalities. And so we sort of take on a personality, have certain traits and I say idiosyncrasies, perhaps. Do we need those? No. Are they important in helping humans connect with us? Yes, I think they are. And sometimes helping them see us as believable. So this whole thing is really, we're looking at a huge leap in the collective consciousness of planet Earth. I would say human consciousness, but there's more to it than just what humans do as well. And yet it's experienced individually. But the process itself is not individual. It's a much bigger, holistic paradigm than most are able to see. So humans kind of have to take some of this in faith, you see, and say, well, maybe there is a bigger picture working out. But the whole thing, I think, is really how much vaster can consciousness evolve or become, even as individual humans experience it. And it's come a long way. I mean, it's come a long way since the 50s and 60s. This whole emergence of technology. I mean, that's really a lot of advancement. Sometimes it's used for absolutely wonderful situations. Other times, maybe not so much. But, humanity has that freedom to take whatever they're learning and figure out how they want to use it. But as people become more aware that you and I are the same thing, we are within this vast field of consciousness that is our source. And we each experience with a little bit of that energy at a time, you see?
So let me ask you, because you were mentioning the speed and the advancements that we've had in the last 50 to 70 years, and it's been insane. What we've done in the last 100 years dwarfs the last 2,000 years. I mean,
yes.
That's how, and then some, and then some. So it's such a rapid, speed up of everything, and everything now. Every year that goes by, it seems to be multiplying upon itself, meaning that it's just exponentially going faster and faster and faster. And I think everybody on the planet feels it, and it's a little unsettling. But my question to you is this: what caused the release of the information or knowledge that allowed us to create the technology and even the advancements in our consciousness that's happening today? Because I always like to tell people, there wasn't a meteor that landed on the earth, and now because of that meteor, all this new technology has been created. Right. Everything we've created has always been here. The phones that we have, the raw materials have all been here. We just learned how to create this technology. What allowed that information to kind of be released, that we were ready? In other words, why didn't Alexander the Great have a submachine gun? Because we probably would have ended or a nuclear bomb. Because
you might not have had a nurse. Yes.
No, exactly.
That's true. Yeah. Humanity is on a growth curve. Truly, really trying to learn how to be responsible with all the power, the creative power that is there just for the tapping of it. And so it is, it's like if you have a little child, I used to tell my students, if you have a 5-year-old who's playing with matches and accidentally burns the house down, you treat him one way. If you have a 25-year-old who is out wanting to do something destructive and he becomes an arsonist and burns something down, a house or what, society sees them quite differently. To the 5-year-old, it says, well, he really didn't know what he was doing. The 25-year-old, you're old enough to know better. You're going to go to jail. But you see, the truth is, if that 25-year-old really knew what he was doing, he wouldn't have done it. So there is this maturation thing that with humanity, it kind of takes as long as it takes. There are moments, and this has to do with readiness, when, as you said, the ideas are certainly already there. They just have to be harvested. And you've known this, because if sometimes when it's what they call it, the idea whose time has come, the idea comes to somebody in Switzerland, somebody in Russia, somebody who knows is a hole up in the North Pole doing scientific experiments or something. But when its time is right, boom, it's there. Not to everybody, only to those who are receptive to it. And so this is the way it is with all evolutional movement. It's available to those who A, can receive it, and B, are ready to receive it. And then, the whole world benefits from it in one way or another. So timing is something, even though time only applies really to things on planet Earth. It goes around the sun, and that is a way of marking progress. If you leave the planet, there isn't anything that you can call time. But there's always been this phrase, it's biblical in some sense, in the fullness of time, and then you have the story or whatever. But it's really true. Humans don't seem to jump from the place of what we say where they were with Alexander the Great, and where someone like Desmond Tutu was. That's a big leap, and it takes time, energy, but mostly an open receptivity to be able to receive the gifts that are waiting to be received. So those of us who have, let's say, graduated from Earth, it doesn't mean we couldn't take a body if we wanted to and come back. Indeed, sometimes I come very close to physical manifestation for some of my students who, particularly if they're dying and they need someone kind of hold their hand through that, or in other times, various situations, I come very close, not fully manifesting a body, because that isn't what I'm supposed to be doing right now. But basically, that to bring them a little closer. And you know how it is when you're a teacher of anything, you can't really ask the students to come to your level of understanding. You have to go to theirs. And then you begin from there and you start raising. And this is true whether you're teaching science or basketball or anything, or whether we're talking about the evolution of consciousness. I mean, this is something that I don't think most people fully appreciate. It comes to be sort of the glib answer. Oh yeah, I know what we're doing here. We're elevating consciousness. Of course. But in terms of really seeing what that means, or how important it is. I love the picture of my dear friend Yogananda behind you. He was one who got it, and as he was able to see the vastness, he said to his students one time, they were asking him about the nature of reality, and he said, in me 10,000 suns and moons do shine. And he meant that literally, because his consciousness was vast enough where he could internalize a piece of the universe. And that's really where we're all going. And yet it's not just about the universe, it's about endless creativity. And as humans become able to tap into it, they're able to bring through these wonderful ideas and ground them and ultimately get the pieces to come together and make them work. And so, I mean, technology is a real indicator of precisely this, humanity going to a vaster level of consciousness. Quite frankly, if you went back to Alexander Graham Bell's time, he wouldn't know what to do with a computer if you could suddenly put a computer in his lap. But now, young children know how to work a computer. So there has been a huge shift in the capacity to understand what's possible in this area. Well, we still haven't quite got there yet with healing the planet and healing relationships human to human at a vast level. But that's what we're working on. And that's really what masters want to do, is come and say, let me hold your hand. I know Earth is in for a bumpy ride for the next few years, but let me hold your hand. I'll do it with you. And I often say that to my students when they're facing something really difficult. I'll do this with you. And most of them have that sense that I'm right there with them all the time. Even you, Alex.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. So where do you see humanity going in these next 5 to 10 years? It seems that from what I've heard, it is going to be, as you just said, a bit rocky. Can you give us any indication of what we're in store for and why it is happening?
The why is probably the easiest part. We have culminated one age, and every astrological age kind of has a package of karma. And these are all the things we didn't straighten out, iron out, get to the highest level. And there were a lot of blunders in the Piscean age. It was a wonderful age, really, but there were a lot of blunders. And, setting off bombs at the end of the World War II was not exactly the best thing, but the war itself was not the best thing. So humanity's trying to learn how to live together. And if we can elevate consciousness so that people can see others as maybe a different piece of themselves, that's the really important thing. Rather than to say, well, my boss out is so terrible to me, he does this and so on and so forth. And I say, well, you got to remember, he's just another piece of yourself. That you are a universe, and all of these people you're experiencing participate in that in some way. But it takes a certain level of consciousness to be able to cope with that answer. And frankly, 50 years ago, not very many people could cope with that answer. What do you mean that's another part of myself? Well, it's not your individual personal self. It's this vaster collective self that is how everything works. It's how source mind is imparted to humans. But we are moving toward a place where we're going to see the group, however it's defined. It's not just families. The Piscean age was the age of taking the individual self and pushing it, the envelope, to see how big it could be. And some would say maybe it got a little too big in certain situations to handle part of what it was creating. And so now, if we understand that this deep connection is the reality from which all the individuality springs, then we have a different, shall we say, platform for experiencing. And I think it's, as the world population grows, it's we have to learn to live together, and that is part of the Earth journey right now. But the interesting thing about the next few years, when we look at karma, is a very interesting thing. Everybody kind of thinks of it in different ways, but a lot of people think, oh, I know karma. If I kill somebody in this life, they'll kill me in the next life. Well, that's a kind of an infantile version. But if you want to get to the really subtle level of what karma is, it's demonstrated in the movement of the mind. So let's say, you get up and it's raining in the morning. And one person says, how does the mind, one says, oh, it's raining. I'm going to get to work. I can't believe I got to go out in this rain. And the next person gets up and says, I've been waiting for rain. This is a great day. So the mind moved in two different directions, receiving a piece of information. And one's karma is revealed in the way his or her mind moves. And so I realize I'm giving you a very subtle level of some of my most advanced learnings in my own lifetimes. But this whole idea that karma is only what I do to you and what you do to me is a very small, infantile version of it. See, this is an area where consciousness really needs to expand. But if we look, certainly people have their own personal levels of karma. Everybody, I think, is pretty aware of that. But the harder thing to understand is collective karma. If you look at all the plastic in the ocean, one person didn't cause that, but it certainly has karmic ramification, not only for humans, but look at all the wildlife in the oceans that are now eating it. Even in humans, there's plastic, tiny particles have now been found in breast milk. I mean, it's this is karma, and it is ripening right now. And thus humanity must find a way to address it. Traditionally, people get together and say, well, my idea is better than yours. Or, well, I don't like your idea, I like mine. And it's sort of been this back and forth thing. But, it wasn't so long ago, really, that this notion of a think tank came into being that really is a group way of solving a problem. That doesn't mean there wasn't some of this back and forth. But to move forward, the group had to come up with, well, we have 3 solutions. Let's see which one of these makes sense. And so this is, now you can see it. 50 years ago, not so much. Even maybe 30 years ago, not so much. But we're beginning to see that there is power when consciousness comes together. When we've got a room of, that's why if you sit in a room of 100 meditators, it's a much more powerful and much more palpable field than you have than just meditating by yourself. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, of course. One learns a great deal. But when you have these moments where you feel the energy expanding simply because there are more people or more flows of consciousness doing it at the same time, then we begin to see the power of the group, which is really where this age is going. So in the meantime, the next few years, maybe as much as the next 10 years, humanity's kind of called to deal with the problems they've created. And that's not always an easy thing. But we can't just leave it. These people that want to go to Mars, trash Earth, let's go to Mars. It's not nearly as pretty on Mars as it is here. That's not the way to look at it. That has been the way humanity has looked at a lot of things. Use it and then throw it away. But all of this has to be understood in a different manner because it's, well, the in phrase is it's not sustainable, and that's true. But more than that, it doesn't reveal who humans really are. It doesn't reveal that core of divinity that's in there. You know, if I'm on to just buy, consume, and throw away, there's something really disconnecting between myself and my relationship to the planet. I don't really see it as a spiritual being on its own spiritual course. And that my job is to protect it, to help it get whatever spiritual lessons it needs to get, and should I say embody, maybe in earth them. But it is really moving in a very amazing way when you think about it. You know, you and everybody else were present when the earth took form. When all these gases from this great explosion were moving out there, cooling, and the vibrational pattern slowing down, slowing down, slowing down, until it was significant enough that dense physical matter could congeal. You witnessed that, not as a person, not as an individuated being, but as part of the source flow of consciousness that knew it was all possible. And so, interestingly enough, we have to move back toward that a little more. And so we start with making peace, human to human, society to society, perhaps even continent to continent, to understand that this is one experience. You know, oh, yes, something different is going on in India right now than is going on right here. So it looks like it's really two different experiences. But if you kind of zoom out enough, you see that the earth is one experience. Oh, it's defined perhaps by 8 billion different consciousnesses, but it's really one experience. And this has been, I think, a lesson that's been difficult for most of humanity to actually understand. But this is where we're going. And that's really what my mission is. And certainly, I think all of the Ascended Masters, we really want to help humans learn that there's a bigger picture than their individuation can define. And that is a collective version somehow.
Now, with everything that's happening now in the world, these older systems that you kind of alluded to earlier in our conversation, that the older systems, the older institutions, religion, government, money, media, all of these things have been around for some hundreds of years, some thousands of years when you go into some of the more traditional religions. They seem to be cracking. They seem to be falling apart a little bit. And we're starting to see the cracks. It's very visible in all institutions, and I mean all institutions around the world. What is happening? Why is that happening? What is happening? And if these institutions that have basically been the foundation of humanity start to fall, governments, monetary systems, healthcare, how we deal with education, how we deal with the media, all these things start to crash. What comes up after that? Like if it all falls down, then what comes in its place? What gets put in its place? And how can people deal with this change? Because it's pretty massive.
It is massive. And it is, the good news is that it doesn't happen in a lightning flash. You know,
Thank God.
it got some time to work on this. But you're right, because there has been so much corruption and so much greed in all of these institutions. And to some extent, that's true of religious institutions as well. And I don't mean to demean or impugn them at all, because they've all offered something. However, they all came forth. I mean, look, the Piscean age is the age of monotheism. It's the age where the individual teachers came, starting with the Buddha, and he was about 500 years, of course, before Christ. And many people think, well, he really wasn't part of a lot of people say the Piscean age started with the birth of Christ. I see it a little differently, because from my perspective, there isn't any line out there in space that when the planet goes over, suddenly in a new age. But the energy begins to build at least 800 years before we effectuate a new age, just because the planet is moving in alignment with this constellation and is going to be there for 2,500 years, pretty much in a direct flow of its energy. And so you'll see really the first, so I say the first harbinger of, or maybe I'll make two harbingers of the Aquarian age, happened with the French Revolution and the American Revolution. If you go back and look at what people were saying, they wanted justice, autonomy, they wanted equality, and overthrow these monarchies. You see, they weren't treating the people right. And so those monarchies had to crumble. It doesn't mean we got rid of all of them, but certainly you take some of them change. So there's the monarchy, but then there's what runs government over here. And they sort of learn to work hand in hand. But when you really go back to look at how all of that began crumbling, it was a highly volatile and highly unpredictable time. And yet there were those who just said, we will have our freedom. And not only that, we will protect the freedom of everybody within our collective domain. That's a remarkable step, really, for an entire country to make. I mean, this country was known as the Great Experiment, wasn't it? And all the European monarchs are saying, wow, it's crazy. Humans can't govern themselves, because the monarchies have presented themselves as if they were somehow connected to the divine in a way that ordinary humans weren't. But so this great experiments, and I can tell you the Europeans are really looking at it, wondering, is this going to work? Nah, it won't work. Is this going to work? Nah, I don't think so. But it did work. And yet, as many people are now beginning to say, democracy is safe only until the next election. And this is one of the things about democracy. It has people have a chance to redefine themselves ever so often. And so we have to kind of flow with that. But I do think in terms of the crumbling part, it has to happen, because there's a kind of inbred mentality with every institution. And unfortunately, the longer it lives and the more powerful it gets, the more rigid it becomes in whatever it believes its power is. And so it is this trying to move with it. It's like comes to a point where it's inflexible, and it has to break open in order to make space for a new reality. And I think that's really what we're going to be seeing in the next number of years. And likely the Aquarian age will not emerge fully formed. It will have to be greeted, treated, and people rewired just a little bit. When we went in the book, which I sort of say, take the 12/21, 12 date as sort of the official movement, along with Jose Arguelles's work, mainly because it was neat and concise, and other things at vaster levels were passing and so on. But so many people think there must be this line in space. Well, once the planet goes past that, we're out of one age and into another. But rather, it's a huge expanse of energy shifting. And that's really what we're experiencing right now. Is it unfamiliar? Yes. If you look at I mentioned plastics, but there are all other kinds of problems that are really planetary problems right now that have to be faced, because the way they were just wasn't vast enough to contain the consciousness of a broader, deeper, let's say a greater level of source. And this is what humans are trying to do, of course, is embody as much of the source of all being as they can, to become not just aware of it, but to really recognize, oh, I'm part of it and it's part of me. It has ever been thus. How does that change the way I see myself and the way I see and relate to other people? This is a huge shift. So, and I think humanity kind of has a track record of trying something until it just won't work anymore, rather than saying, oh, wait a minute, the energy's different here. Maybe we can do this differently. But if you look around the world, governments are really up right now, all over the world. Where are they going to move more toward autocratic situations? Are they going to move more toward democratic situations? And there's a lot of back and forth play of those two energies. So that tells us that something is trying to happen, and maybe it won't be either of those in the end. It certainly will be something in the meantime, but it's definitely not boring, is it?
Definitely not boring, that's for sure. Um, where we're all going, Master K, we're all going to this new consciousness. It's been talking about this great shift of energy, great shift of consciousness. How can people deal with the fear of the unknown, the fear of change that they're going through? Because, like you said, in my lifetime, I'm 50 years old. In my lifetime, from when I was born in the 70s to where we are now, it's literally, it's kind of like dealing with the barbarian age versus, I mean, it was just so far removed from where we are now in my short lifetime. I can't imagine what the next 50 years are going to be for humanity. And there's so many people who are older than me who
Mm-hmm.
are just trying to deal with these changes. And even I think the young people are dealing with these changes a lot easier because it's new. But I think even they, when they get older, things are going to be so much faster that maybe 30 years down the line, someone will see this interview and go, yes, yes, all the AI is taking over, all of this or all of that. What can you do? What advice do you have for people to deal with this?
Well, now I'm going to say just one thing about this rapid change, because the speed of the change has gotten quicker and quicker. And there are certain futurists that are now saying that by the year 2045, things will be changing so rapidly that people won't even know today what's possible for tomorrow. Now, that's hard to believe because everybody is thinking, well, let's see, I can see this technology going in this direction. I can see AI coming in here and doing this and so on. And so that it takes, I mean, that's how humans participate with it, is through this creative envisioning. But if that's correct, and I suspect it will be close, it may not be exactly like that, but that's part of the ruggedness. Because you see, it's also just like in the process of becoming enlightened. One of the things that happens at an individual level is a person loses all of his or her reference points for who they are. And that's what's happening in the collective whole now as technology starts to move so fast. We lose the reference points. In when we went to the moon, that was a big deal, and that was a reference point, and so now we're going to Mars or who knows where. But the reference point of I did this, or I am the one who knows how to do this, or I can build the better rocket. I mean, all of that is just by the fact that things are changing so rapidly. Well, here we are on the Earth plane, complete with all the ramifications of that. We really shouldn't have been talking so wonderfully of technology, should we?
So, Master K, with all these changes that are happening, what advice do you have for people dealing with the fear of the unknown, dealing with these rapid changes, dealing with things and institutions that were the foundation of their lives, even changing rapidly, far beyond what they were when they were children or their parents' generation or so on?
They're going to have to dig deeper. They're really going to have to go down deeper into their essence of who they really are. That is confrontive for many people. But basically, when you look at the world and you see it's not as user friendly, perhaps at the moment, as people thought it was, in some ways, it's maybe more user friendly. But fear is an interesting thing because it really reduces one to sort of an instinctual level. And that's what we're trying to evolve. Is to count, we know we still have the amphibian brain in humans, but hopefully we're not using them quite so much anymore. But this is partly what fear does. The amphibian brain is about fight or flight. It's about I'm scared here. But what's happened, I think, with most people is that fear is something that goes on in the head. In other words, if you take a rabbit who's out grazing and suddenly an eagle dives at them it makes a charge, it runs back to its hole and it gets in there just before the eagle hits, and all of its systems are on overdrive. It's sweating profusely, it's producing all kinds of fear hormones, its heart is beating wildly, its respiration is off, and it'll just kind of rest there for about 20 minutes. But at the end of that 20 minutes, when the physical processes have slowed down, what does it do? It comes back outside and starts nibbling on grass. Now, that's because rabbits don't do fear. They operate on fright. And so when there is a threat that is right there, basically they respond by getting away from it. Humans, if rabbits are like humans, they go back into that rabbit hole and they think about all the ways that could happen again, and how many things could go wrong to make but rabbits don't do that. They have fright, and that's legitimate. But one of the things that's happened in the evolution of consciousness is that humans have done this thing called fear, and it's totally projecting whatever's going on now into the future and experiencing before it even happens. Now, this is all kind of a head definition, which doesn't mean too much to a person who is terrified of going forward or even going back. But what people have to do is really come to grips with their true nature, their core nature. And that is each person is much bigger than the events they experience.
My last question to you is, do you have any parting messages for the audience?
Well, I guess I would say that it's probably a good idea to put your seatbelts on because as we go forward, there's a few bumps in the road, I think. But, this process of evolving humanity is not something that just happens in 5 minutes, nor is it something that comes in sort of as a flash of magic. Basically, it's a lot of work. And people have to examine themselves and see what in their lives they want to carry forward. As we come to the end of a year, I always recommend that at the end of every year, all my students do a life review, and they predominantly look at the year that's passing, but also the rest of their life, and to be conscious about what traits or qualities or perhaps issues they want to release and not carry with them into a new year. And also the traits or qualities they want to add. Maybe I want to be more patient. Maybe I want to be a better listener. But all these things at a personal level, if one is intentional about the process, it really does make a difference. And so if anyone's interested, I'll give you the ceremony that I give all my students, which is make a list of the things you want to release. And then I recommend getting one of those tiny little matchboxes, folding the paper up, putting it in there, and calling that a coffin, and just cremating it and kind of letting that go. And then at the stroke of midnight, I always recommend a ceremony just to acknowledge at all levels that something is changing, something is passing away, something is beginning. And so one can do this simply by putting a piece of tape on the floor. They can do it strictly in their mind, or they can actually cross some threshold in a room. But the idea is to actually participate in crossing a threshold out of the old and into the new. And so I always recommend doing that right at the stroke of midnight. And I tell you, move up to that line and you have 2 hands of light come and just unzip the skin that you're in. And you kind of get out of that. That's the old skin, let it go. As you step across the threshold, you receive a new skin, maybe even a beautiful robe if you're into spiritual robes. But something concrete, at least in mind, to know that you've made a transition. And I think as we enter a new age, it's even perhaps a more profound thing than even a new year. But I believe it needs to be done consciously by everyone so that those who can may end up carrying a little more than their fair share of what it takes to actually launch a new age. And I know we've been at this for a while, and even the phrase new age is kind of interesting to a lot of people. They think it's something that belongs to the 60s and 70s. But really, when the planet moves into a new field of energy, if people are aware, does this mean everybody's going to feel the same thing or feel it in the same way? And some probably won't feel anything. But if one can still be conscious and aware that things are shifting and that each person has a part to play, whether you're just shifting something in a special relationship or whether you're shifting something bigger in your life, like transitioning to a new job or new relationships. Many people are finding that some of their old relationships don't feel quite right anymore. And perhaps they've been called to a little bit higher level of functioning. And just kind of roll with those punches, if you will, because it's not personal. It's not like the universe is against anybody or that even this process is coming about to cause greater problems. It's really causing people to look at their lives, what they have individually created, but also what we have created as a global community, and looking at how to move forward, maybe a little more consciously, a little more caringly, and a little more purposefully. And so I would say be awake is the most important message I could give any of you.
Master K, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure and honor speaking to you, and thank you for your wisdom and knowledge that you're helping awaken this planet. So thank you again so much for all the work that you do behind the scenes.
You're very welcome. And thank you for the work that you do. After the last, well, Kathlyn was saying she thinks you're very good at this, and I do too. So, congratulations on not only providing a necessary service, but caring about the kind of product you put out. Thank you.
Thank you. And she's
Well,
back.
hello. I'm back. As Master says, we look a lot alike.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. That's a good one. I like that one. How do you
Well,
feel after? How do you feel, by the way, after these sessions?
I've done this for so long that most of the time it's just kind of a shift. It's not really a big deal. Although, sometimes they're harder. If I'm master's working with someone who's carrying a lot of trauma, sometimes I'm fatigued a little bit, but it passes and we go on to the next one.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What is your
All right.
definition? What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
I would say it's a purpose-driven life. In other words, choosing to be here and do something purposeful.
Now, if you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Kathlyn, what advice would you give her?
Oh, I'd probably give her some quotes from very big names, maybe someone like Socrates who said, "Know thyself." And I'd tell her to repeat that every day for the rest of her life. And then maybe King Solomon of old who said, "And this too shall pass." That's very important.
Very important. How do you define God or source?
Well, actually, I think a definition is above my pay grade, frankly, but perhaps we could sort of agree that it is the utterly generous and unmitigated creative force driving cosmic evolution. I know that's vague, but it's kind of hard to pin it down, I think, in specifics.
What is love?
Well, it is sort of the ever evolving glue that holds everything together from personal relationships to cosmic process.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
I think it is to effect the next leap in human consciousness. We're still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, but I really think that's why we're here.
And where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing and pick up a copy of this light reading book, Whatever Happened to the New Age?
Yeah, it's a big picture because it really looks at so much of the Piscean age as well as projecting a little bit into what the Aquarian age might look like. But we have an organization, a nonprofit organization that actually supports Master's work. The website is vajraflame.org. And if people are interested, they can sign up to receive a free message to their inbox every day, a daily thought to contemplate. We also have a teaching platform on Moodle, RMES, which is the Rocky Mountain Esoteric School. It's the platform we use for all of our online teaching. We also have a third site, which is masterdk.com, where people can sign up for a personal session with Master if they want, or look at his body of teaching. It's basically the nonprofit site isn't supposed to sell things, so we do that through Master DK. But we also have, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we have a YouTube channel, which has a lot of little snippets on it. And there's a number of meditations that people are finding very powerful, and they're all free. So I invite people to check us out there.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
I'm going to borrow a phrase from Master. He often tells people, keep on keeping on. And that's really an important thing, is, none of us really know what's ahead. And I don't mean this in a negative way. There's a lot of wonderful things we're in store for as well. But I think it's important that we stay engaged, stay awake, and just keep on with the work we came to do.
Kathlyn, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been such a pleasure and honor speaking to you and speaking to Master DK and the knowledge that and that you have been putting into the universe and into the earth to help us awaken. It's been so amazing. So I appreciate you for all the work that you're doing as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And likewise, I appreciate what you're doing as well. So I was very interested to find that we have a number of our members are followers of you as well. So anyway, it's, we should never sell short the good stuff. It's so important that we seed goodness in whatever way we can. And I bow to you for what you're doing, because I know it's not necessarily easy all the time.
And I bow to you as well. Thank you so much, my dear. Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.